Hi folks, you're with Tassos today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to just have a closer look at the recent disturbances around the mass migration project that the globalists are forcing on all the white Western countries without the consent or agreement of the local population. But this is sort of a microcosm, if you like, in Liverpool, in northwest England, that really, I think, encapsulates many of the issues that are around this mass migration, very blatant in my view, mass migration project. So this just as a little bit of a backstory, and I'm sure many of you know about this, but there's been a massive increase in migration to Britain, in spite of governments getting elected on that they're going to drastically reduce migration. Nothing of the sort's happened. And there's a very extensive coalition of NGOs that are organising, facilitating, funding and assisting the illegal entry of people from France and the illegal migrant camps in France, giving them boats and getting them across the English Channel to England, where they're just waved in, and they're being given accommodation in good hotels. They're being fed, given money, mobile phones. They're being very well looked after. Bearing in mind that most of these people come from not all, but most of them come from quite impoverished countries. So they're just arriving in England. It delivers a vast improvement in their standard of living, and they have certainly an attitude of entitlement, which is encouraged by the NGOs, these activist globalist NGOs. So what they're doing is there's these masses of illegals arriving, and they're claiming to be refugees or one refugee status to another, which is really hard to accept, given that many of them are passing through 5, 10, 15, 20 countries to get to England. So they're hardly refugees. They're just freeloader opportunists. But again, the NGOs fund them, encourage them, tell them that they're entitled to this sort of thing in a first world country. So they say, oh, that sounds good. Many of whom are illiterate in their own language, let alone any other language. So the government in Britain is waving more and more of these people in, thousands upon thousands of them every month, and is struggling to accommodate them. Now, one of the activist judges in one of the courts said that you can't house these illegals in, say, barracks that are plenty good enough for the armed services. Can't do that. That's infringing upon their human rights. They are entitled to 5-star hotels, and that's it, which is in itself beyond absurd. And the government, of course, doesn't push back or fight back against that. The government will put any amount of effort into suppressing, white supremacist Nazis, but when it comes to this, they just go down like a sack of shit. And there's nothing we can do. It's the law. The judge said so. But when it comes to breaking the laws and the Constitution, chasing people over, say, the COVID lockdown, then that's quite all right. Nothing wrong with that. So the government's being very, very selective, as all white Western globalist controlled governments are now, being very selective in which laws they want to apply and which cases they want to prosecute, and so on, and where they claim, well, hands are tied, the law says so, but their hands are not tied when they don't want it to be. So again, very selective, which effectively removes the rule of law and due legal process from our daily existence. Nonetheless, coming back to the Liverpool thing, now it's an area that's probably one of the poorest areas in England. This part of Liverpool, it's like around an area called Kirkby, which has been renowned since the 1960s since the deindustrialization process began. It's been really one of the poorest areas. It's for more than 100 years, I think it's returned a Labor member of Parliament. So it's very, very leftist. Nearly everyone there is on a government benefit of some sort, but they're finding it very hard to get by with the energy prices and so on, today, and then they see this bunch of illegal people that shouldn't even be in the country being set up in the only hotel in the area that's, I think it's a 4-star hotel, this one, but it's swanky compared to the general area and how run down it is. And so they're seeing these illegals being put in there, these people come from quite strict Muslim countries, and they have very little interaction with women outside of a chaperoned situation or arranged marriages, those sorts of things. And the idea of intimate relations, as we would understand it in the West, is something that isn't, the full body missionary position. Sex or something isn't a staple of their existence in those sort of places. Any intimate relations between men and women, for certainly for the masses at least, is purely for the purposes of procreation, which is seen as much in religious teachings and so on. So when they come to the West and see men and women mingling together, schoolgirls, girls going night clubbing and unaccompanied girls walking around, things that would be unthinkable in their own culture, they interpret this as thinking that the entire country is full of prostitutes. That's all that happens here. Now, Western schoolgirls, being schoolgirls, will purposefully walk down a street where there are lots of these migrants hanging around at the front of the hotel, just to bait them to see if they can get a response and so on. And that needs to be also put in perspective. Also, there's a video going around where there's a schoolgirl who's supposed to be, I think, 14 or 15 years old, where she's being approached, according to this short video at least, being approached by someone, I think it's an Afghani man in his mid to late 20s, and who seeking some sort of liaison with her. Now, my guess is she's purposefully walked down the street. Not that she shouldn't be able to walk down the street if they're being harassed, but my guess is she's gone with some friends, purposefully walked down that street, maybe walked up and down a few times until she got the reaction she wanted. But there's something just a little bit too organised and curated, particularly with her sort of then quoting, here's a supposedly 15-year-old schoolgirl, one of the poorest areas in England, very, very, very working class, and she's speaking without a local accent. Like, the local accent is very thick. When they pronounce the suburb of Kirkby, for example, it's Kirkby. It's like that. So she's not talking with a local accent there. So suggesting she's not from around the area, the schoolgirl, and then giving the guy sort of a moral lecture on the law of, that's against the law, you go to prison here, that sort of thing. In the it was almost like an organised speech arranged. So I'm smelling setup there. I think that's just a bit too stage managed to be natural and organic. Let's assume it is for the moment, though, that it is natural organic. So that video does the rounds, and a bunch of locals, quite understandably, say, well, why are these illegals here in the country anyway? Why are you putting them in 4-star hotels and they're living a much higher standard of living than we are? And we're the local Indigenous citizens, and we have, why should we be living unable to pay our electricity bills, whereas these people are getting electricity, food, accommodation, and everything for free, on top of being given things like mobile phones to call their buddies back in some third world shithole and that sort of stuff. So there's a very genuine sort of set of concerns, multiple concerns on multiple layers here. Now, they assembled, the people came out, like, just looking at the videos that are done by the citizen journalists, there's a lot of old people and so on, and just local citizens that you would be hard pressed to point to any of them as being professional activists, unlike the people on the other side of the argument, but they're just concerned local citizens. But that sort of concern isn't allowed. If any white citizens gather, no matter how genuine their grievances and concerns are, the body politic isn't taking any notice. They're controlled by the globalists. They're not listening to the hoi polloi, the white hoi polloi. They're controlled by the globalists, and mass migration is the go. And if you don't like it, you're a fucking Nazi. And so, sure enough, the globalist controlled media rolls into gear, into the narrative. Fascist Nazis are gathering Hitler, and they're right into that. And but the concerning thing is, I don't know how set up this was. It just got set up, stamped on it, so they can flush out these concerned locals, and then a group of balaclava dudes arrive, and almost in a fully choreographed stage play, they set fire to a police vehicle. Do it, very professionally. It's like they've arrived, they know what they're doing. Let's get the accelerants, let's get bang done, and off they go again. That seems to me to be agent provocateurs. That strikes me as being once the government, for example, I'll put forward this theory. I don't know it's accurate or not, but once the government realises there's going to be a gathering of concerned white people, they've got to gin it up. So they've got to burn something. Someone's got to die. Someone's got to be beaten up. There's got to be a migrant, an illegal migrant's got to say they were bashed. They've got to gin it up somehow, and so they send in a goon squad to set fire to the sacrificial police vehicle so that the mainstream globalist control media can get their footage of, see, look at that, look at the violence from those fucking fascist fucking Nazis everywhere, left, right, centre, up, top, back, everywhere, Nazis. And so that, sure enough, that's the narrative that they ran with. Now, the citizenry of Britain, England would be quite rightly concerned about these masses of people arriving, whether they be illegal or not. But in this case, the illegal ones, and the very, very generous treatment they're getting, and the inability of the government to deport these people when they're found to not be refugees, and to have filled out, to have made claims that are simply unsupportable and not true. But whenever the government tries to deport them, somehow the NGO machinery kicks into gear, and they're able to get free lawyers. They're able to file documents on midnight on a Sunday. They're able to get emergency hearings from activist judges, so the government can say, well, we tried, but the law won't let us. It's the law. And are you saying we should break the law? Is that what you're saying, you damn Nazi? Our hands are tied. And so they go through that silly ritual of saying there's nothing they could do. I mean, they could change the law in seconds if they wanted, and they could make sure that an activist judge doesn't get to hear the case. They could start penalising these NGO lawyers and saying, hey, you guys aren't in a fucking charity. You're just activists working for the globalists. That's all you are. So you're going to have to pay tax now, and so on. They could easily solve this, but they don't, because this is what they want. It's all part of the charade, and they go along with it. And I noticed there's a few other demonstrations, fully legal demonstrations that are being organised around England, when immediately the body politic and the media click straight into gear. Are these concerned citizens having a legal, fully legal protest? No, it's not. It's fucking fascists. Damn white supremacists, Nazis, they're everywhere. And the same thing goes out. Now, what was interesting, as soon as the protests in Liverpool was underway, was the amount of NGOs that came screaming into the void to push their propaganda about how, again, Nazis were everywhere, and how helpless and poor and put upon these illegals might be. You might think that they're all young men at about 30 years old that have illegally arrived, illegally trashed, come through numerous countries, bribed people, smuggled, you may think that, but here's the reality. So they put out this outrageous propaganda that's parroted and supported and amplified by the mainstream media, the BBC being one of the main offenders. But the one I'll just go. This is the one they wanted to headline with. Now, the media coverage of this really annoys me because it's so dishonest. The lies they're prepared to tell to push this narrative and to support the mass migration, which again they're globalist control, and this is the globalist narrative. But our entire media landscape across the Western world is just so thick with lies and propaganda that none of it is accurate anymore. Other than when they start the broadcast in the morning saying that the time is 8 o'clock and this is the news, that's about the only thing that's accurate at the time that they give. But everything else is lies and propaganda. So they pick a guy who comes from an impoverished third world country that has until recently been, in parts at least, like a form of tribal civil war type stuff. But now he's passed through, this guy has passed through 19 countries, and he's abandoned his wife and children somewhere or other, and he's arrived in England as an illegal immigrant. And now he's had his papers and passport right up to the point where he enters England, where he suddenly loses them. So I mean, straight away that should cause that should raise a red flag, and deportation should happen at that point, or go back to the last point of embarkation, like the illegal migrant camps in France, that sort of stuff. So he's gone through. When I say he's gone through 19 countries, they've eventually found out where he had come from. And if you look at the route that he took to get to England, it's 19 countries. So he's got through the 19 countries, and he's got no skills. He's illiterate in any language other than his rural tribal language. He's never lived in a city before or anything like that. He's only lived in really a jungle type rainforest jungle type environment. So he brings no value or skills or anything at all. Now his asylum claim or refugee claim is rejected. So now it's all being handled. His whole claim and application is being handled by NGOs. So he switches his story and says, really, he's a homosexual, and if he goes back to his country, he's going to be so the NGOs are arguing on his behalf. He's going to be victimised by the locals or the authorities back in his original country. Now, straight away, so hey, you're only saying that because A, they told you to, and B, because it's a ploy to get in here. But for some reason, the authorities in Britain just came, oh, you're gay, are you? Oh, well, that's all right, then in you come. And so he's brought in. Now, the guy can't get any work, do anything, so he's employed by an NGO. Doing what? I don't know, and a consultant of some sort. I'm hard to figure. But because part of the deal is he's got to find work in a certain amount of time, or there was something like that. So the NGO just gives him, registers him as an employee. And whether he's actually working or doing anything or getting paid or what, is harder to say. But once you start to look at the story, say, well, hey, hold on a minute. They could do that. They're painting him as this poster child victim, where look at, he's entitled to stay. Look at this man. Look at what happened. But you could really tell a very different story on this guy if you weren't running a propaganda narrative. So you say a guy just decides to leave his country of origin. He only wants to go to a rich white country because he's a freeloading parasite. Freeloading parasite barges their way into England, destroying papers and lying to authorities. Imagine we had a headline like that. You go, hey, get rid of that guy. But instead, it's painted, of course, very differently. Or you could have man abandons family and doesn't pay child support. Deadbeat dad wants to get entry to England, but doesn't care about his kids. Children going hungry, and he's oppressing the children and not paying child support. He's a fucking deadbeat. He's a fucking Nazi. You could really describe this man very differently. So the whole narrative is built around inventing and creating victims. Man travels through 19 countries to freeload off English taxpayer. Send him home, says government. You could easily have those stories, but of course we don't. We see something quite different, and we see the propaganda here. So that's just a bit more about that disturbance. I see a lot of stage management and curating here, and I think I'm wondering whether the whole thing was a setup just to flush out some protesters who believed they were genuinely protesting something that may actually have been stage managed, just so it can be denounced by the government as being fascist, Nazi, and Hitler's everywhere, and so on. You've been fantastic today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.